and it's controlled by the Atlantic Conference Board. So there is areas that are MSC certified. Not every area in the Maritimes are. It's kind of interesting to look at it, what's going on. It is open year-round, continuously, which is kind of interesting. The fish seem to be growing larger. There's an increase in fish over 88 centimeters, and don't ask me what that is in inches because I couldn't tell you. I flunked metrics. But that's an interesting thing in the past couple of years with the surveys they've been doing. They have surveys. They survey about 300 different areas in the zone around the provinces, and they've been fairly consistent, and they have good coverage of what's going on with it. An interesting point. The Atlantic Council, I'll have to give you, that's just like the FEOA up north. It's the same. That's the owner, I guess you would call it. I have no idea what the manager. Yeah, thanks. I'm not sure where I was, but
300 different areas.
Yeah, there's 300 different survey areas that they go out and they're pretty consistently. They get maybe about 75% of that done on a yearly basis. Every 2 years is the incrementation of the deal. The U.S. has really no fish there because they sort of gave it up when the EEC came into effect in 72, I believe, and then reinforced in 1977. There is indications, though, that the U.S. has a fishery in what's called 3O. It's way out. It's beyond the EEC, southeast of Newfoundland, and there's a quota potentially of 400 metric tons the next coming years. But it's in the middle of freaking nowhere, and I'm not sure that any vessel, U.S. vessel, is going to go all the way up there. There's only 2 that can actually fish, go up there and come all the way back. I'm sorry?
How far is that area? Like off from shore?
It's beyond the EC, so it's
200
days. Yeah, it's up beyond that. Yeah, it's way up in the North Atlantic, kind of. I don't know why they did that. I have no idea. It was a big surprise. This just came up recently. Cat. Before it would only be about 200,000 to 300,000 pounds. The last whatever, and nobody's gone and fished that because it's not worthwhile to go up and do that. So it's completely owned by Canadians. Out of the MSC, there's about 23 individuals meaning companies and boats, et cetera, that have qualifications to buy the MSC product. There's some other interesting things that take place in what they call common property fisheries. We call common property different. It's sort of subsistence fishing, sort of. There, in Newfoundland, has an opening sometime in the summer, sometimes several times, where everybody on the island qualifies to catch between 1,000 and 1,200 pounds of fish. Unlike our common property or subsistence fishery, that can go on the market, the commercial market. So out of the middle of nowhere, and you have about a week, 2 weeks to notice that it's coming. They'll have this fishery, and it's kind of interesting to see. There's also one off Nova Scotia, but that's more boats, and that's a little bit more understandable. So it's a little different, obviously, than what we have here in the Northwest. That's a general view, Greg. I don't know how much more specifically you want. But I think the important thing is that it's a fishery that's growing.
Yeah.
And it could supersede the Northwest in the next couple of years between Canada and the U.S.
The projections are up.
Yeah.
How many ports do they purchase the fish?
There's 23 different companies, and they're all over. I mean, they're in Newfoundland, they're in Nova Scotia, they're in, I don't think BEI has any. What's that?
Boston.
Yeah, how many been landed in Boston?
No, it's not. It's all landed in Canada and brought down, which has been complicated because of our president with the tariffs that he's put on. So that's been very interesting.
But they all have infrastructure there to support that.
Yeah. And again, it's a quota-based thing. It's not like ours where you have an individual fishing quota. It's an IBQ, so it can be transferable to it. And if you're fishing, if you have 10,000 pounds of fish and you only have 8,000 pounds of quota, you can make phone calls and get guys to transfer that quota to you from different companies or different boats.
Similar to how Canada operates.
Right.
2B.
A lot easier than the U.S. I mean, you can't do that in the
You
U.S.
could go
I
to
feel.
jail the rest of your life, do that in the US.
What's that?
You go to jail the rest of your life in the US, you do that.
Yeah, and rightly so. But
Yeah.
because it's a different system. I mean, the individual fishing quotas rather than the transferable quotas. If we had gone to the transferable quotas in 1995, it'd be a completely different thing. We'd have a completely different fishery.
So question, you said everyone on Newfoundland gets 1,000 to 1,200 pounds?
Yeah.
And I just checked, there's over 500,000 people that live there.
Right. Not everybody goes fishing.
Just a heads up for folks that are wanting to make comments, if you can remember to turn your mic on so we can record it, that would be great. Thank you. Greg?
Yeah, good. Nope. Okay, that's on. Are we really doing this?
Hi, Mark. What is it like? What's the percentage of fresh versus frozen, like the infrastructure within the processors? You know,
Well, since it's open year round from April 1 to March 31st, it's only closed for 24 hours basically. It's like Alaskan bars that, you're closed from 5 to 6 in the morning. It's the same kind of similar deal. The majority of the fish goes fresh.
Okay.
And it goes pretty much everywhere now. It can do it. They're shipping. But also something else to keep in mind is Norway has a tremendous commercial fishery going on now too. Very successful. They also have a extremely successful farming of halibut. They've done a tremendous job of it, and that's everywhere in the States now. I mean, it's in LA, it's in Chicago, I think there's some that have come here to Seattle. And it's same kind of fish, the mulatto. That's the only thing I can think of. The mixtures, it's not brown or green and then white on the bottom. It's kind of like a pinto.
modeled.
That's a better word with it. But it's very good, and the growth rates have really increased. So it used to take 7, 8, 9, 10 years. They've been doing it 5 or 6 years now, very successfully. I don't know what the amount is, but I have conversations when I go to Barcelona with several people that are increasing it. So, and again, that's good. That's good for the market, because the market up here, or the whole overall quota is going down. We need the fish because we've established, going from 70 million pounds of fish in 2004 in the Northwest to what we have now. The market's been established around that. And of course, the vast majority, what's the majority of fresh now in the West Coast? Kind of lost track of that, but it's probably a good 80%.
85%,
With
maybe higher.
on that. And as far as the frozen goes, there's obviously very little inventory here, as opposed to what there were in 2006, 7, 8, when there were problems and everybody had nightmares about the amount of fish that was there. So the same as here, the vast majority of it goes fresh. And that's the way it should go. And it's all over the place. And it comes down through Boston, New York, and places like that. And there are companies in the States that do own quota through Canadian companies as well. So, there is that with it. So.
So is there any infrastructure to freeze?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. They can freeze, yes, and they do freeze. Primarily in Quebec, they freeze product. So, but you try to sell as much fresh as you possibly can. I would imagine now with the dearth of fish that we have here, more people will freeze that. The other thing to bring up about the pricing in the States or in Canada, here it's kind of consistent. Let's just use the $7 dock price here. That doesn't change drastically over the season. There, it's incredibly hard to keep track of. I don't keep track of it. Somebody else does. So it's easy for them. They understand what's going on. But, it can go from 2 weeks ago, it was $15 a pound. In the summertime, it's $6 a pound. So it goes back, and the drastic changes that take place are pretty interesting. The other thing that I really enjoy about the West Coast or the East Coast fish is that it's very difficult to lose money. Unlike the history that I had for 30 years selling here, you'd make a dime sending stuff to Boston, New York, Florida, whatever. You don't lose because it's a cost sharing and a profit sharing, which Carl's father and I tried to do years ago, Jorn, getting that cost sharing and things. Also, when boats are delivered, you have 3 or 4 or 5 days to settle up with the boats. And that means that you can go through the number twos, the chalk, things like that. And the boat takes responsibility for it. So there's a lot more camaraderie between the fleet and the processing world up there, because it's a combination. It's not as delineated as it is here between the two sectors. It's not there. So you can actually make money on halibut on the East Coast with it. So
What's the effort like year round? Is it pretty consistent?
Yes.
Or, okay.
it gears up during the holidays because there isn't anything from here. And then it dies a little bit in the summer because there's other fisheries obviously going on and the competition with what's going on from here. But in the this time of year into the spring, the effort is really good. And then in August, it's really good. They do have chalk issues, just like we have in the Northwest. So we always thought that the Atlantic fish didn't have chalk and we were the only ones that did, but that's not true. And it's actually increasing. The amount of chalk is increasing in Canadian halibut. So
Did they have to fight predation issues like we fight killer whales, sperm whale?
no, they haven't gone from the pot fishery. I haven't heard of anybody doing that. I mean, I'm sure there's some predation, but not anywhere near what's going on in Alaska.
So they're using pots.
I don't know of any that are yet
Okay.
using pots to do that. And there's not as many whales that do that. I mean, the right whales are down to 400 animals. And there are whales, obviously, but they just haven't figured it out yet, like the guys up north.
We should ship some over. Yeah, I was going to say, I know we can export some.
I'm sorry?
We can export some over there.
Whales?
Yeah. God.
Good luck. Actually, from a personal standpoint, because when I started fishing in the 80s, we never saw whales. And now you see them, and I think it's fantastic, to tell you the truth. But that's just me from a personal point of view.
I mean, I can tell you stories of certain whales. We have certain names for them that aren't going to be shared here. But, I mean, they literally have their whole forehead as solid line marks from years and years and years and years of running it.
And then they've taught their kids how to do it.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
that's what's amazing about it.
and they're fearless now. I mean, they're literally 6 feet from the roller.
Yeah.
Which is a little unnerving when something that's,
A sperm whale?
70 feet's hanging out next to your 55-foot boat.
Yeah.
You have elementary classes sponsoring each whale too?
Not in Yakutat.
Mark, thanks for the info. We should probably jump back to the agenda. Yeah, real quick, your
is there any
88
other-
centimeters is 34 and a half inches.
I'm sorry?
34 and a half inches, your 88 centimeters. Size,
But that's what's increasing, but the standard is the same as ours here. It's
32
It's just below 32 because it's centimeter. whatever it
metric,
is,
yeah.
it's just below.
So just to move into the market a little bit more, is there a difference between Atlantic halibut, either farmed or wild caught, than Pacific halibut in the market? in
Well, there's
your
no
opinion?
Atlantic farm. They've successfully done it. Was it?
Your mic, Peggy.
No processing or packaging differences for either product? For European, for Pacific halibut and all the others? Atlantic and Pacific halibut that's being farmed in Norway? Are people
Sorry, but-
eating it in different ways?
No.
Is it packaged in different ways? All that?
No,
Okay,
it's sent
thanks.
H&G or they can do fillets and things like that, as well. So
In those areas, have they like banned trawl fishing that are
Yes.
growing? So that's the common
Yeah.
denominator where there's no
Right.
draggers, there's lots of halibut.
right, they kicked out the trawlers years ago, and they're protecting some fish. The redfish is coming back. Some cod is coming back. Cod collapsed in 1994. And then they went to other things, and it's amazing how many people here don't realize that the Apilio fishery there is 100 and something million pounds. When I mention that, but that also is important with what's going on with getting rid of the trawlers and then increasing stuff, and hopefully cod will be coming back as well. So they're all managing that. Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
It's okay, Mark. Appreciate the information. And I'll be attending your presentation tomorrow night and look forward to hearing more. Okay. We have Ian standing by, move into the mortality limits and TCUI conversation. So he'll be available to ask any questions. So we can invite him into the room. There he is.
Morning.
Good morning, Ian. Thanks for coming in. Can you share on the screen?
Not easily,
Or
but we can
maybe-
access any of the
If you don't need
information
to
from
do it.
yesterday's
Okay.
presentations. Yeah, probably presentation 12 if we want to talk about projections.
Yeah, so that's the TCUIs, and then there's the other table.
Yeah, let's go to the presentation, I think.
There's one of these is just status quo, not plus 10%. Is that correct?
Correct. I think back one slide should be the status quo
I
projection.
think that's the good starting point for conversation. There we go. Thank you. Okay, open up the floor for discussion. How are people feeling about looking at this graph and where we're at and how we should go forward? Nick?
Hey, Dr. Stewart, I just had a couple more scientific questions. So yesterday you talked about how we're in a PDO negative environment right now. And I was just curious, are there any indicators on when we will know if and when we go to a PDO positive? And then secondly, considering we're in a PDO negative regime right now, are there singular years that could have like a positive environment within that long-term range?
Yeah, good questions. I'll take the second one first. There are definitely ups and downs in the PDO cycle. We classify it into positive and negative, but within that, we've got warm years, we've got cold years. And I would highlight that, for example, the 1987 year class was in a positive regime, but it was head and shoulders above all the year classes around it. So the PDO doesn't really predict individual year class strengths well at all. In fact, we've done a lot of work trying to find a better way to squeeze more information out. We've looked at a 5-year running average. We've looked at individual years. We've looked at only when the PDO is really extreme. Does that predict something? And really, we can't do much better than just these 10 to 30-year periods of when it's in a positive period, on average, we get better recruitment. And when it's in a negative period, on average, we get poorer recruitment. So it really isn't a good explanation of individual year variability. That said, there have been some warm years even within the recent cold regime. We had a lot of you probably remember the warm water in the Gulf of Alaska in 14, 15, and 16. That more or less corresponded to or to positive PDO conditions during that time period. The other challenge we're having is that historically the PDO, when the PDO was negative, for example, in the Gulf of Alaska, the water was cool. The gyre in the Gulf of Alaska was going counterclockwise, which is good, we think, for moving halibut to the west. There were a whole bunch of factors that were all kind of lining up in the same regime. In the most recent 10 years, there's several papers in the last 5 years highlighting that in the most recent PDO regime, things are changing. So now, for example, we've had a bunch of years where the PDO is strongly negative, but the water in the Aleutian Islands is warm, which is something that never used to happen in a negative PDO phase. So I guess I'm using that as a backdrop to say that our predictability of using the PDO is really pretty poor, and perhaps breaking down looking forward into the future. We don't, to answer your first question, we don't really have any way to predict it. And often we don't even know when we've shifted for several years, because like I said, we had warm conditions in 14, 15, and 16. And it actually looked like we were in kind of a mini warm, positive PDO, and then it shifted back to negative. And now in retrospect, it looks like we just had a few warm years. It didn't really change regime.
Greg?
Hey, Ian, thanks for being here. Always good to see you. Yeah, you had a graph that showed size of our age of fish coming into the fishery, and I remember it was pretty flat and then just dropped off. Can you go further into? I mean, what you guys think that means, or I mean, I know what I think it means, but I want to hear from you.
Yeah, thanks for highlighting that. I mean, there's several different factors that can play into that. If everything else is equal and all of a sudden you start to see a lot of small fish in your fishery, that can mean you just had a good recruitment. It can be a good sign. It can also mean that your fishery has caught all the old fish and you're now shifting to younger fish. So that can be a bad sign. For halibut, it's even more complicated because we have the minimum size limit. And so if we get an improvement in size at age at those fish that are right around the minimum size limit, all of a sudden we start to see more 8 and 9-year-olds in the catch. But it's not because there's a lot of them. It's because they're just growing just a little bit faster and getting over that minimum size limit. So to be honest, I'm not sure whether we should be a little bit concerned or a little bit positive about that pattern, but it definitely stood out in the data, and that's why I added that figure. It's kind of new this year because it really jumped out to us as a change in the fishery. And I think anytime we see a change, we need to stop and evaluate and think about what that might mean. Another year or two, and we'll have a much better read on just how big these year classes are, and I'll be able to tell you, hey, these fish are definitely growing faster, and that's why we saw them, and there's not that many of them, or there's actually a lot of them, and they're not growing any faster. We just had a big year class, and so we saw them in the catch.
Let's hope for the big year classes.
Yeah.
Bruce and then Carl.
Yeah, thanks for coming, Dr. Stewart. There was a lot of information digested, try and digest yesterday, and last night we kind of got into some varying discussions on it. About some people are thinking maybe we should go down a bit. Some people think we should stay the same, and we're still struggling with that. One of the arguments was that it looks like on a biomass thing you're relatively flat right now, and that could be an argument for looking at a status quo. There was kind of a couple of different debates. If people think it should go down, but the biomass indicates that it's status quo, then those same people would be arguing that we fished too much this year. But the other argument was with the 2012s being fished out and the biomass remaining status quo, but a higher percentage of the 16, 17 fish. We get into this in the groundfish and into the sablefish too. When the average size is smaller, you're fishing more animals, right? And we don't ever capture that in any of this data. And if you're capturing more small animals, you're discarding more small animals. If we maintain the status quo, the discard, and we're fishing more 16, 17s, I would think the discard rates would go way up, would they not? And that would be an argument for not fishing fish. How many, didn't you say 15% or something of these 16, 17s are mature, or with more coming in? I can't remember exactly what you said. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we're in that range of 10 to 20% of these fish in the 8 to 9-year-old range would be mature. So there's definitely a lot more growth and maturity for those 2 year classes to come. And I think that gets at your other question, which is if you catch them now for the same number of fish, you're getting less yield. out of those year classes. If we catch them next year, or the year after, they will have matured. Some of them will have spawned. They will have grown. So on a per fish basis, you'll actually get more yield out of those year classes. But I mean, that's definitely where the question comes down to this year is what is that worth to people in terms of catch now versus catch in a few years?
Are the discard rates must be going up then?
I can look at, I have, it's documented in the data overview. It'll take me just a second to look it up. They vary across areas. So, but I can look that up for you. It's a little bit harder to see in the discard estimates because the quota went down. So the overall, the discards went down as a function of less fishing. But I can call up the rates. It'll take me just a second.
Carl?
I think just back to Greg's question, just with the growth, is it they're not growing because there's more competition for food?
Draggers are taking all the
Or, well, I mean, blackcod eating it, draggers taking the food out.
We're getting some mixed trends. So some of the younger fish are actually growing faster now
Okay.
than they were in previous years. We've had some improvement over the last decade, but it's mixed across age classes. And the older, larger fish are not responding as quickly as the younger fish. So that's why we're not seeing as big a change in the yield as we might. Those, especially the 10 to 16-year-old fish, are either flat or not really any better than they've been in a while. But the younger fish, we've definitely seen better growth of those younger fish over the last decade.
So follow up on what Carl was just talking about. If I'm a small fish and I need X amount of protein to grow to the next centimeter or whatever, but if I'm a 20-pound fish, I need more protein to grow to the next centimeter. I'm a bigger animal. I mean, does that make sense where it might point to a food lack?
I wish I could give you a better answer on size at age. The growth is something that we've been studying for 30 years now, and we don't have it all figured out. It makes sense that when there's a lot of fish in the water, they'd be competing with each other, and they would be on average smaller for their age. But as we've seen the abundance of fish come down over the last few decades, we haven't seen the same response, or at least not immediately. So there was some thinking that, well, maybe it has to do with other competitors as well, arrowtooth, cod, other things. That hasn't really panned out to explain the whole pattern either. We are certainly for a particular year class, we catch the fastest growing fish earlier in their lifespan. So if you have 100 fish and some grow fast and some grow slow, the ones out of that 100 that get above the minimum size limit first are going to get caught. And so if you track the average size of that 100 fish over their lifetime, by the time you're down to the last 10, it's going to be the slowest growing fish out of the initial 100 because you caught all the fast ones along the way. So there's that going on as well. And that doesn't mean they can't get big. It just means that every time you start a new cohort, you catch those fast growing ones as well. But we don't have a good explanation for or a good understanding of what all the factors driving size at age.
Heather and then Bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Ian. Are these growth trends across the whole stock, or are they different in different areas? Are they different in, say, the Gulf and the Bering Sea? Can you talk about that a little bit?
I can, and there's some figures in the data overview document that's on the website that get at this as well. The biggest trends in size at age have been in region 3. That's where historically the fish were the largest for their age, and then now in recent years are the smallest for their age. The patterns are a little bit more muted in region 2, and there's actually been a lot less pattern out in region 4. The fish in region 4 tend to be over history have tended to be much more constant in their size at age. What's challenging to interpret that, though, is it doesn't necessarily mean that that's reflective of the conditions in those areas or the fish in those areas, because you might also imagine, based on our tagging data, that the fastest growing fish are the most likely to move. And so it could be that the reason that we see faster growing fish on average in region 2 is because that's where the fastest growing fish end up. So the whole stock is linked. And if we have the fastest growing fish leaving region 4 early in their lifetime, then we're left with not a lot of variability in region 4, but also not the fastest growing fish. So it's really a coastwide pattern, a coastwide phenomenon, even though we have definitely some hotspots of small and larger fish. And the Central Gulf is really where the smallest of the small fish are.
Over the years, like I've noticed, like different halibut depends what kind of food they're eating. There might be different flesh. If they're eating crab, you know, it's a nice, really nice flesh. But has there been a change in the diet of the halibut over the years? You know, they eating more crab, or they're eating different other species that maybe aren't as productive or as nutritious?
Thanks for the question. So we don't, because of the way halibut respond on long lines, which is basically they get hooked and they immediately eject their stomach contents. We don't get a lot of good stomach data from our survey in particular. We do team up with the NOAA scientists, and they can get stomach contents from the trawl surveys. And there have been some long-term shifts in diet, but to my understanding, those long-term shifts have been, I think, more reflective of just what's in the environment. So when we go through a period of years when there's, say, more crab in the Gulf, they tend to eat more crab. And when there's something else, they eat more of that. They tend to be quite generalist, and they can certainly eat nearly anything they can get their mouth around.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I could just loop back. I was able to put my finger on the graphic with the sublegal discard rates, and I'm just looking across the rates. So they vary by area, but in the western areas, for example, 3B and 4A and 4B and 4C, D, and E, where we might expect to see the most small fish, the sublegal encounter rates were as high as they've been in the time series. So we had a dip in the last 7 or 8 years through those low recruitments, and then they've been generally going up. And especially in the West in 2025, we had very high discard rates. For example, 3B was at about, 60, more than 60, closer to 70% by number of the catch was sublegal in 3B last year. So that's from our survey, because we don't have the sublegal rates from the commercial fishery, but that's generally pretty indicative. And where we have both series together in 2B, we have the logbook records of sublegals and the survey records, and those generally agree. The ups and downs in those patterns generally agree. And in 2B actually as well, the 2024 and 2025 discard rates are on the range of 50%, which was only higher back in like 2006 or 7. So pretty high as a percentage, pretty high discard rates right now.
Okay, I'm going to follow up. I'm confused, so that's going to make my question even more confusing. Sorry about that. We also had, seems like, more discussions last year than this year that the fishing isn't having a great deal of effect on the biomass right now anyways. And certainly we all have a moral compass that would say we don't want to impact these fisheries, especially if we've got premature fish that are being discarded and killed. We're really, you know, we're hurting ourselves, and creates a will to say, well, let's go down 5% or 10%. If the fishing isn't impacting at all, or minimally, 5% or 10% is going to impact it even less. Like, fundamentally, we don't want to be discarding a bunch of premature fish, but really, what's the effect of a small or large increase on the TAC right now? Anyways, I think I got my point across.
Yeah, and I think I can speak to that. I would sort of separate the thinking into two parts. The first part is, in terms of our management action and how much the stock's going to respond, what we want to see is a big recruitment coming through. And what we can do in the range of plus or minus around the status quo is not going to appreciably affect the probability of another big recruitment coming through. That's based on everything we understand about halibut. That's going to be largely driven by the environmental conditions. When the window of opportunity arises, as long as we have some spawners out there, we'll get that recruitment. On the shorter term, though, and what we see in these 3-year projections is more the effect on the biomass that's already in the water. So I think the management action right now and the response that we're likely to see from the stock is going to be about the trend over the next few years. Is what's going to happen with these 16 and 17-year classes? Do they grow a little bit more before we catch them? Do we catch them now? And there's a bit more yield to be had out of these year classes in the next 3 years, just to break even by the end of that 3 years. That yield goes up a little bit if you slow down the harvest because, like you said, you're catching fewer fish for the same amount of yield if they grow a little bit more before you catch them. But there's a cost to that because you got to wait a year or two or more to get them. So I think that's the trade-off right now, and that sort of the difference between what is likely to respond in the stock and what isn't going to respond. Did that help your question?
Carl?
I don't know if I'll get castrated for bringing this up, but I think the big elephant in the room that's nobody's really willing to talk about is whale predation. And everyone's dancing around it. Everyone knows how bad it is when they're fishing. And I think there's probably 20 to 30% of fish being removed that's not being accounted for when whales are present. So I think that's having a lot bigger impact than what you guys are noticing on your surveys. And I don't know if you're seeing it like through the logbook books, if guys are, I'm assuming they're not recording it, but I know particularly in Canada, guys are going to have to adapt to learn how to fish differently or at different times or in a new sort of manner to sort of try to avoid it as much as possible. But I know what was in the presentation as far as what whales were encountered, and it's laughable almost, but is there other data that's coming in that's kind of playing into it a little bit?
It's a good observation, and there's no question that we are underestimating the amount of whale depredation right now because we're not explicitly including it in the assessment. We did a couple of years ago, we did a bunch of work with the logbooks and the observer data to try to piece together, well, how much could we be losing to whales? We based that on how much is caught when whales are present on our survey and when they're not. And we came up with an estimate of like 4 or 5% of additional catch, and that didn't, as you just said, that didn't really sound like enough to a lot of people. In the sablefish assessment in Alaska, they add on a little bit to account for whale depredation, but it's in that same range of 3 to 5%. It doesn't really add up to much. I think to finish that line of thinking, we just don't have a way to estimate it right now, and so we're kind of stuck. And we know it's a component of the mortality that's missing in the assessment. So the follow-up to that is, so what does that mean if we're missing that? Where do we go wrong? There's a couple things. One, the stock looks less productive than it actually is. So we think, well, it's only producing this amount of yield, but actually it's producing more yield, and we're just not seeing that additional yield. So that's probably contributing to some of the trends that we see. The one good thing about the data that we collect is even if we don't know what the whales are eating, when we get our survey index, that survey index reflects what's actually in the water. If the whales ate a whole bunch more fish last year than we knew about, when we do this survey, we get an index that reflects the actual mortality because we're sampling the population, right? So the index and the information from the survey is still reflective of what's actually happening in the world, even if we don't understand all of it. So I think given that, the explanation is, well, the trend is probably pretty reasonable because it's going to already have the true whale depredation included in it. But our estimates of the productivity to maintain that trend might be off a little bit by whatever amount the whales are taken out of the stock. And I guess just to round that thinking out, unless we expect the whales to go away tomorrow, we can't really do anything with that additional productivity anyway. It's off the table unless, like you say, we can make some shifts in the fishery and try to actually reduce that problem. And the commission's been, we didn't present it at this meeting. We did a bunch of work this year on a catch protection device to try basically a metal shuttle to try and find a way to protect catch from whale depredation. And that, in the long term, I think that's probably the most promising solution to whale depredation, is to fix the problem, because trying to estimate it is going to be virtually impossible. We're trying to estimate something that we can't see, right? I mean, even the guys on the water, they know the whales ate some, but they don't know exactly how many fish were eaten. So it's a big problem.
Heather, just a second, I'll make a comment and then I'll go to you. Anecdotal to Carl's point is that, and I'm sure that staff is aware of this or should be, that, there's been a very rapid shift in the blackcod fishery, which was the primary challenge, was the sperm whales in that fishery, to pots. To address that, that has greatly increased the predation on halibut in the longline fleet from sperm whales. So what that percentage is, I don't know, but I'm hearing a lot more reports about, and closer and closer to home all the time, about whale predation on the hooks. So I wouldn't be surprised to be hearing some proposals in the near future about pot fishing for halibut and what that looks like, because the whales aren't going away. We all know that. Go ahead, Heather, and then Greg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Along those lines, is there, I know this is probably a dumb question, it's being discarded a long time ago, but what conversations have you had at IPHC regarding doing surveys with pots?
Yeah, thanks for the question. We have had some conversations about that. We could certainly calibrate pot gear against hook and line gear, just like we've calibrated snap and fixed hook and different baits. The calibrations themselves take some additional resources to do, so that would be an additional expense on the survey. At this point, we lose so few stations on the survey to whales that it really just doesn't seem necessary. Our survey operates very differently than the commercial fishery. We don't set very much gear relative to a normal commercial set, and we move a lot. We move at least 10 miles between stations. We encourage our survey captains to take evasive action when the whales are around, either not set, move to a different station, buoy off the gear, leave it, come back to it. So we really, as Kayla showed, we're running at about less than 5% of our stations lost to whales. So at this point, I don't think it's a serious impediment for our survey activity, but it could be in the future. So it's definitely something that's on our radar.
We had Greg next, and then Peggy, and then Bruce.
This is kind of off subject. I just wanted to give you an idea of the efficiency of these sperm whales. So we fish a lot on my boat while I'm running the plant. We had a specific set that's always been a great combo set. So 1,500 fathom skates, about 1,500 fish catch, no whales on board. We traditionally set this set if we don't see any whales on the way out, because they'll come find you. We hauled the same set on the second trip, and we had 83 fish. So that's how efficient they are. I mean, just to get your mind around that, you're talking basically the hell is that, a 95% removal rate when they're there in 200 fathoms. I mean, just so you get your mind around it, that how they are really efficient.
Hold on, Bill. Got a couple in front of you. Go ahead, Peggy.
I was just curious why there wasn't, I forgot to ask this earlier, no snap gear in the survey this year.
Thanks for the question. We didn't get any bids from Snap Gear. We honestly thought when we calibrated with Snap Gear, we would vastly expand our pool of vessels. And the feedback we're getting is that most of the snap boats are pretty busy with blackcod, and there just isn't as much interest in additional work right now as there might have been had we tried it 10 years ago. But it was very disappointing to get so few additional vessels joining our pool. We have had a few. Eric Velsko comes to mind. And there have been one or two others that have fished snap gear for us. And I apologize that I don't remember their names off the top of my head, but it's really not been a big expansion of our pool of vessels.
It seems like that's a shame to me because the data was really growing and it was significantly different from longline in some areas. So if that were to change in the next couple of years, could we maintain the throughness of the data?
Yeah, we have enough calibration work done now that I think we could integrate snap gear anytime it was available. Our bidding process that's open right now is available to snap vessels. If somebody wants to participate, we would encourage them to bid. And we can use those data. We have enough calibration to use them. Going forward, if we could drum up more interest in snap vessels, that would be great. Especially out west. If anybody knows anybody who's willing to work for us out west, 4B especially, but for CD&E when we bid there as well, are challenging places to get vessels to go.
Yeah, thank you. And just to add to the snap gear discussion, I've had a number of discussions with people over the past few years, particularly once we opened all bids to snap gear. And there's been some that say that they don't have size to hold crew and or our shack on board, or just that they don't have the time, as Ian mentioned. And I would say to that if there's any of those type of potential hesitancies, that I think it's important that we still hold that discussion, because I think increasing our pool of survey vessels is something that's a huge priority of not just mine, but the IPHCs in general. And I think we would be willing to sit down and have those discussions and try to modify things where we could. For example, we do have some vessels, a vessel in 2A that we don't deploy a shack on board, and we do make modifications. So I think if there's any interest in participation in the survey in any way, I think it's really important that we sit down and have those discussions. Just want to put that out there. Thanks.
Kayla, really quick, what does the commission do as far as outreach to the fleet about opportunity? What are the methods? Where do you go to do that?
So there is a media release that is published as soon as our tender specifications are published online, which our tender specifications are, for as long as I've been here, are published right before the December holidays. So late December. And then I try to disperse the information to every contact that I have, whether it be prior FIS vessels or anybody that I've spoken to in season or just in passing, if I have any phone number or email. We also have port staff that have communicated with vessels throughout the season, that we maintain their contact information and provide a notification when tender specifications are announced. We've just kind of cold called people depending on who we have contact information for. It's really just about word of mouth and trying to maintain the communication. Unfortunately, I feel like it's usually midway through the season where somebody will be coming into port and they'll be like, oh, hey, I think I might want to do the survey. And then they send me an email in July and I'm like, that's great. This is going to happen in December. And then come December, I can't get a hold of them again. So that's been my big challenge right now, is I feel like summertime people seem really interested. And then it's hard to get that interest back up when we are actually looking for the submissions.
Okay, just an idea for you that National Marine Fisheries Service maintains a database of IFQ holders with address information. You could send out a letter to that entire list
Yes.
pretty easily.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yep. Bruce?
Yeah, back to this whale thing. It's the FIS is kind of hard to quantify the whale predation because, especially like out west, I always used to joke, no self-respecting whale would follow us around out here. We're not catching any fish, right? So you don't have a problem with whales when there's no fish. And even when you are out west, there's a couple of boats that are fishing out there, and they are where the fish are. The whales are where the fish are primarily, not always just where the boats are. And those guys have got whales all over them. They're even out there. I think they're even tearing into the slinky pots, right? But and when you do to Norm's point, when we did a charter at Omni once, and some of those, that's a high catch, maybe the highest catch area of all the charters, and some of the areas where we are sampling are right in the middle of one of the more prolific fishing grounds, and the whales will swim right by you to the blackcod boats, right past the halibut boats, and do it. And now that the halibut boats are taking mitigation efforts, it is impacting halibut. But so you're not catching the whale predation on the fish charters, and it's pretty sporadic in the commercial fleet. We've got lots of boats that go where 60-70% of their fish was eaten by whales. I mean, I think what Greg's saying, this is way past anecdotal now. This is a huge fishing thing, and even to not impacting the biomass. You pick up your gear, you move, they've only got 5 days or something for a fresh trip. You're going to lose a day and a half to move your gear. And if the whales follow you, you know, that's not such an impact, but boy, the impact on the fishery is just incredible.
When the whales follow you.
Yeah. If they follow you. Yeah.
If I might, I guess I would also add that we don't have any easy way to correct the logbook trends for whale depredation as well. So we know it's in there, but we don't know on a year-to-year basis how much of an up or down is affected by the amount of whale depredation that was encountered during that fishing season.
Bill, you're next. And then Liam.
I was just curious about when the whales are hitting on you. Is there a certain depth that they're at, or at the surface, like giving you stink eye on the surface, or are they way deep and you don't even know if they're there or not? Can you feel the line shaking around? And
They're super aggressive now. They're not shy. You know, I mean, we've had up to 6 whales just laying around the boat. You know, like you're literally
with a halibut in their mouth, or
more or less. No, they're it's where we fish. They're not sneaky. They just, here I am. I'm going to take your fish. They'll hang on the surface, then they'll dive down and feed. They're not going to, not going to feed around the surface. And it's, we've only lost a few pots the last 3 years with them. Like maybe a dozen pots to them. But I'm hearing horror stories out west.
yeah, they're ripping them like in half.
Well, so what I'm hearing is out west, like Western Gulf, is it's killer whales. Is they'll come up under the slinky, and they'll just pull the bottom out, and the blackcod just go. So they'll come out with a hole about this big, with no blackcod. They haven't had cases of sperm whales. Like every once in a while, you'll get a crushed one. It was obviously a sperm whale, but they haven't figured out the intricacy of like the killer whale that I'm hearing.
Liam?
They wait by your flags too sometimes. Like they're not near your boat, and you get to your flag, they're all waiting on the flag.
I actually have a video of sperm whales playing beat into the buoy with their head. Like, it's like, haha, this is so fun.
And then put scouts out, right? And wait for them to start picking. They'll wait.
Go ahead, Liam.
So maybe I'm missing something, but is there no way we're retrieving any data from the fishermen for estimated whale degradation per trip? Is there a mechanism that's in place there where we can get some cumulative data from each fisherman? Because I think as a fisherman, you guys, Greg, Bruce, you'd have some kind of idea, 500 pounds, 5,000 pounds. It's better than, I don't know what we have for collecting the data from the fishermen.
Yeah, thanks for the question. We did add, trying to remember exactly what year it was several years ago now. We've added to the IPHC logbooks fields for whales observed, number of whales, and damaged gear or damaged fish. We historically, before that, we actually had a field that was to record how many fish were lost. And based on feedback, it was just too subjective for people to try and guess what was lost. So we settled on these other categories of things that were more easily quantified. You can just count them, tell us what whales it was. And that was the data that I used a couple of years ago to try and evaluate how frequently whales were interacting with the fleet. When I did that and presented some of that information, some of the feedback I got offline was that not everybody's comfortable reporting that information. Some people were and some people weren't, and that we shouldn't take it at face value as a full look at the entire fishery. And that's a challenge. I also would note that because of the way electronic logs are used in 2B, they are not receptive to making changes to those logs. So we have not been able to add those fields to the 2B logs. So our port samplers will ask the captains and essentially do an interview and collect that information. But if we don't encounter the vessel directly, the skipper directly with one of our port samplers, we don't get any of that information in 2B because it's not in the electronic logs. So I guess in a nutshell, we're a bit stumped on how to get complete and reliable reporting on that and whether that's even going to be possible.
So it sounds like we're missing a lot of data overall. Like, yeah, okay.
Nobody wants to report it because they don't want it used against them. And it would have to be totally anonymous to get some data.
Everybody thinks it's going to come out of the TAC. There's huge resistance to reporting it. That Carl was reluctant to even start the discussion here today. It's the elephant in the room, and no one's going to help us quantify this. They feel it impacts their income, you know.
Ian, I have a question. What do you right now you're adjusting for, what did you say, 4 or 5% for whale removal? It's in there. You have a percentage?
So right now in the halibut assessment, we do not make a correction for whale depredation.
No correction.
We evaluated that a couple of years ago. The correction that would have come out was around 4 or 5%. And our scientific review board said, given all the uncertainties in the data, it might not really make sense to do that. I noted that in the sablefish assessment in Alaska, they do make a correction, and it is on the order of 3 to 5%. And that was probably an underestimate when it was mostly a line fishery or mostly a hook fishery. Hard to say now that it's mostly a pot fishery. Sorry, I was going to make one other point on this topic, but I forgot what it was.
I interrupted you, sorry.
That's all right.
Okay, yeah, that's helpful. I was, if we were deducting it, if we had a correction for it, I was just curious about how we would go about changing that number without any real information that would correlate. And I
And
don't
that's
know,
really where we
it's pretty
ended up,
tough.
was without a really solid estimate to stand on. It was just kind of a story to put
Yeah.
it together. The point that I did want to make is I'm definitely sensitive to the fact that people may or may not want to be reporting this because it could be used against them in other contexts. When generally, and we've looked at this over a wide range of stock assessments, if you're underestimating the catch, you're underestimating the biomass as well. What happens when you put an additional amount of unobserved catch into a stock assessment is that the biomass goes up a little bit because you had to have more fish to produce that extra catch that you weren't counting before. The productivity goes up a little bit, but then you account for the fact that, well, if it's, say it's 20% going to the whales, things go up by 20%, but then you have to take that 20% back off because you expect to have them again next year, and you end up with kind of a net neutral. And that's where we ended up with our scientific review, is that it was probably not going to have a huge effect on the assessment.
Would that
Carl?
then affect like potential spawning of biomass going forward to help build the stock? If more fish are being technically removed, that's not being accounted for. Like, I understand it signifies more productivity, a larger biomass, but then if you're removing more fish that could potentially be spawning in the future, then that could affect it going forward.
It would certainly affect our estimates of spawning biomass in an absolute sense. For example, when we start talking about what would constitute a depleted state for the stock, that would have an effect because that's an absolute number. In the general assessment, it would essentially scale out. it would, things would go up and then they'd come back down based on the productivity. And so it really doesn't have a large effect. Now, I do want to say that that's if you have a baseline level of unobserved mortality. If the whales take 20% every year, then we're just off by 20%. And, we could add it back on and take it back off again, which is what they do in the sablefish assessment. And it really wouldn't change things a whole lot. Where it becomes important is if things start to trend rapidly. So if we have a period when whale depredation goes from 1% to 30% over a 5 or 10-year period, that can cause bias in the stock assessment, because we're not tracking that additional mortality. It's like we were incrementing the catch every year, but we weren't accounting for it. And so that's the situation to watch out for. And I don't know, that was one of the primary questions when we did the analysis. Is there evidence that there's been a rapid increase in whale depredation? And there wasn't at the time we did that. Was a couple of years ago, but that was only 2 years into the transition to pots for sablefish. So at this point, I don't know. I'm not sure whether there's evidence for rapid increase. The problem is the best evidence for rapid increase in whale depredation would be coming from the logbook information, and that's the part we don't have. So those are the challenges that we have.
All right, thanks, Ian. I'm going to call a brief recess. I think maybe 15 minutes or something. We U.S. delegation side is asking for some input from PAB members, so I'm going to step out for a minute. All righty, folks. We got, I think, most everybody back into the room here, so let's get reconvened. We still have Alan in the room for talking about the TCY stuff. If go around the table and see if there's any more questions. If not, we'll let him go, and Alan's waiting in the wings here. Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, Dr. Stewart. Can you speak to the what do we call this? The harvest table, the one that's got all the stock trends, stock status, fishery trend, and then the projections out. So looking at the stock status, being below the SPR 30%, it's basically, it's 24%. There's 24 out of 100 chance if we don't fish, and there's 26 out of 100 if we take fish intensity of 40. And that kind of carries down through the chart. And I guess I don't want to say it doesn't make sense to me, but it would seem like it would be a greater impact on being below the overfished rate.
Yeah, it's a good question. It came up sort of peripherally yesterday. The explanation is that there's a lot of uncertainty in our current status. And so there's a chance that we're already below that 30% reference point. And if we are already below that 30% reference point, we would stay there under this whole range of quotas. And if we're not under it, this range of quotas wouldn't push us below there. But the uncertainty in our current estimate is such that we could be down in that range. So I don't know if that exactly answers your question, but basically it's a bigger question than the amount of harvest that you see across those alternatives. It would take more than that to move the lever on that particular metric.
Is that okay, Norm? Do you have a idea of what percentage chance we are below the overfished rate?
Yes, and that's actually in the other presentation. There's a summary table that has the probability that we're below B30 as of the beginning of 2026, and I believe that's. Sorry, I can give you that number off the top. I think it's 19%, but I want to make sure I give you the right number. And I can give you the reference so you can look for yourself. That would be from presentation 10, the assessment presentation. There's a table on slide 35, and sorry, it's 28%. So the probability that the spawning biomass is in 2026 is below our SB30 reference point is 28%. Correct.
So you can't link that to the screen so we can see what you're.
10, yes. Slide 35. And that's actually similar to estimates we've had over the last few years. We estimate that we've been above that B30 for a number of years now, but it's a pretty broad distribution around that. And that's because we have uncertainty both in the stock size we actually have in the water and in the unfished stock size. And so both of those are, it's a ratio, and both of those things are uncertain. I think they're coming up with the slide here. Sorry, the 19% was the probability that we were below our reference fishing intensity.
Could I follow up on that? So I'm reading across the thing. So it says basically 28% chance of being below a SB 30. And the trend says spawning biomass increased 7% from 2025 to 2026, with status being not overfished. Reading across the chart, the table. And you said that's pretty much where it's been for the last few years, that 28%. 35. So this is actually the time series of the status estimate, the current being 38%, and the blue band is the uncertainty around that. So you can see that that extends below the dash line, which is 30, just barely above the B20. So our understanding, our best estimate is that we've been above that B30 reference point all the way back to the early 2000s. But there's a broad amount of
Ian, for clarification, the 20, the orange line depicts the floor. That's like no fishing beyond that point.
Correct. That would be in our control rule. That would be the conservation zone.
Yep.
And between our harvest strategy provides that the reference fishing intensity would be scaled down. If we were to estimate we get below B30, we would scale that reference level down to 0 at B20. So that's our kinked control rule that would reduce fishing anytime we drop below 30% with, at our point estimate.
I would just call out that we're pretty darn close to that line by this estimate.
Yeah, quick question. Do we ever define what that scaling is going to look like?
Yeah, so the question, it was maybe a little hard to hear. What does that scaling look like? So it's actually a linear reduction in the FSPR rate from 30 to 20. So we would fish at half if we got to B25, we would fish at half the fishing intensity that we were at B30. And that's written out in the harvest strategy policy, which is newly adopted.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ian, the new harvest policy refers to a depleted status, but the depleted status line has not been determined yet. And that's going to be determined between now and the next annual meeting. And who's going to determine that? Or are they going to make a recommendation and then the commissioners agree to it or not at the next annual meeting? And okay, I'll ask another question after you answer that one.
Okay, maybe I'll start by recapping where the process so far. So we've been discussing our approach to reference points with our scientific review board for years. We have in the past already discussed the use of absolute reference points. Even 2 or 3 years ago, we were discussing whether or not the 2023 biomass should be treated as some sort of reference point. As an evolution of that discussion, the scientific review suggested that rather than focus on a point in the time series, that we think about a concept of what would be an absolute reference point for a depleted stock, regardless of environmental conditions. Is there a stock level that if we got to that level, we would want to cease fishing, even knowing that fishing might not be the reason we got there? So that's what the depleted concept means. That came up this last year at our scientific review. They directed Alan to think about how to tackle that with the management strategy evaluation, and he went away over the season, provided some analyses back in September to the SRB based on the stock recruit relationship and looking at different levels of what's called depensation, which is that basically when you get to low stock size, your stock gets less productive, not more productive. And so he evaluated a range of those, and he identified a preliminary threshold of biomass that I believe was in the 90 million pound range. And he brought that back for the SRB, and they thought that his approach to the methods that he was using was appropriate. We had some discussion about, well, what probability would you want to stay above that to count as depleted? Would you want a 100% chance that the stock could recover or a 95% chance? There was some technical nerd discussion. And then they concluded that we were on the right track. And so now Alan's going to be reconditioning the operating model this year based on the updated assessment, including the updated maturity schedule and things. I suspect he will be he'll be redoing that analysis about our depleted, what would define a depleted threshold, presenting that to the management strategy advisory board over the year, and also the scientific review board. And so in a long way around, I would expect that there would be an option for a depleted level in front of the commission, probably at next year's process.
Thank you. Follow up, Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead, Heather.
So there would be another line on this graph then? Would there be another line on that graph? And what is the anticipated relationship between the lines that are currently there and the one that might be there if you determined the depleted line? I'm having trouble sort of integrating those two things. And the second part of that is there going to be a confidence level around that line? And so it's going to be a little hazy.
Yes, there's going to be a confidence level around everything because we won't know for sure exactly what the right value is. If we go back one slide, please. Alan has some slides that show this even better, but if you just focus on the blue line here, the status that I just showed you on the previous plot is the ratio of the blue line here to the black line here. So you basically, what fraction have we reduced the stock by fishing? A depleted threshold would look like a flat line across the bottom of this plot at whatever level we would estimate would be a level of biomass we would have a compromised ability to recover from.
But there would be confidence intervals around it,
There would be.
unlike the red line on the slide that we were originally looking at.
Correct. So if you go back one, the red line here doesn't have uncertainty because it's not an estimate. It's just a proxy. It's a choice.
Okay.
It's a value
Okay.
that's fixed.
Okay, got it.
I mean, I guess if the commission adopted a threshold level, there would be uncertainty in how we developed it. If they adopt it, there might not be uncertainty around it once it's adopted because we would be treating that as a fixed threshold.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Alan or for Ian while he's here? Carl?
I don't know if you could comment to did you see a increase in number of like the effort in, I'm just trying to think how to word it, like the number of vessels that went out to go catch in the logbooks, the landings versus the landings to catch the pounds? Like, was there more landings to catch the amount of fish that came in this year?
I have not looked at the
Okay.
actual number of trips. When we standardize, we're just standardizing on essentially gear deployed.
Got it. Okay.
So if that's a proxy for trips, then any place the catch rate went down, that would imply more gear.
More
But
gear.
that could have been more gear on the same number of trips, or
Trips.
it could have been spread out
Right,
on trips.
okay.
I haven't looked
Yeah.
specifically at
I'd
that.
just be curious to look at, because it seems like, you know, as an observation from, you know, it took more trips for our guys to catch their quota,
Yeah.
even though they might have been deploying the same amount of gear out while they were out during those trips.
And that's a metric that's not captured in the CPUE series
Right.
that I present, is how many trips were made.
Right.
We're standardizing. I mean, CPUE, commercial CPUE is complicated already because people use different hook spacing, they use different soak
Right.
times, you know, so we do our best to standardize for those things within effort, but then trips is a whole nother level of part of the effort.
Right.
I would say it's not as critical in a longline fishery as it might be in a trawl fishery, where you might be your search time before you actually put the trawl in the water. But it's certainly going to be a component of the effort, but it's not one that we're measuring right now.
Not measuring it. Okay.
Yeah.
Carl, I was thinking along those same lines yesterday. I asked Joseph for some information for some landings over a time frame. For Canada, 2023 was 674 landings. 2024 was 591. 2025 was 619. Alaska, we went from 3,590 in 23, 3,451 in 2024, 3,071 in 2025. That's 514 less landings in 2025 than there was in 2023. So pretty significant decline.
But I guess it
Average.
would need to be look at the average, because the quota also went down in those years as well. So it might not be reflective of it. Yeah.
There is a trend there. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions for Ian? Okay. We'll let you go. Thank you, Dr. Stewart.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. Thank you very much.
Okay, next thing on the agenda is the management strategy evaluation, and that would be Dr. Hicks. And I'm not sure if there's any overwhelming questions, but we'll give you an opportunity to ask. Wondering if we can, maybe Dr. Hicks can suggest which slide we could share that would best give us an overview of that. Oh, he's not here. He was sitting back there talking to myself. Okay. Well, we could jump ahead to the FIS design and see if we can get Dr. Webster.
He's been called.
Okay.
He was just here.
To note on the FIS design, in case you guys weren't already aware, which you may be, but this morning they did vote to modify the 2026 FIS design. In 3A, we will no longer be doing Yakutat and Prince William Sound, and instead we'll be completing Gore Point and Fairweather. And then in 2B, we will be adding Goose Island. Yes, it was adopted this morning. Yeah, and Prince William Sound and Yakutat were removed and replaced with Gore Point and Fairweather. And in 2B, we added Goose Island, which means all of 2B will be surveyed in 2026. Well, each charter area will be sampled. Sorry, I should clarify that. There's a portion of Vancouver that'll be completed.
Go ahead, Heather.
So what is the financial ramifications of that decision? And the second part of the question is extra money that came from Canada and extra money that came from the US, how is that being distributed in terms of the budget for the FIS overall?
Let me pull my computer. Yeah, I can touch on it, and then Dr. Webster can touch on it as well. I'll just use my phone. It's okay. I have it accessible here. It'll be easier.
Yeah,
Yeah, I can prepare. Yeah, that would
we're
be
going to
great
get
if I
into
can
the FIS
prepare that
again later.
information.
So
Yes.
yeah, Alan's here. He's probably going to get called away.
Yes.
Okay.
No, that's okay. But just to note, if you do refer to Dr. Webster's paper on our FIS designs, we did take these we pulled options from that table at the end of the paper. So we added option 4, 5, and 6 from the table in his paper. But I can speak on it a little bit more later. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hicks.
Actually, Dr. Webster just got asked a similar question in the conference board. And his answer on what they're going to do with the money, basically, that they've received is it's still in discussion with the commission. So I think we're uncertain exactly how that money will be used. I'm not sure, but I don't know that we've received all those funds already anyways.
A staff appreciation trip to Honolulu.
Well, the next annual meeting.
Well, okay, there you go. Alan, can you, I want to get something up on the screen to share as far as the MSE goes. Did you have a particular slide that probably would give a good overview of something we could discuss around the board?
I think there's two from my presentation. One is slide 10 and the other is the second or third to last slide on the work plan. Yes, presentation 11, if you can bring that up. Yeah, 10 first, and that's that one. So the conference board was actually very interested in this slide, and I have additional pictures of this at different SPR levels or fishing intensities. But the idea behind this slide, and this is something the MSAB has been very interested in, is understanding what current productivity means, right? The purple here is what could happen over the next 60, 70 years to the spawning biomass if we fish at a fishing intensity of 43%. So we fish this way. There's a lot of uncertainty and variability in the future. You know, it's a wide range of potential spawning biomass. And why is that? Because we don't know what recruitment's going to look like. And we don't know what weighted age is going to look like. Are we going to have experience another 87-year class, for example? Are we going to get weighted age that look like it was in the 1990s and very large fish for their size? That's all happened in the past. We don't know if that'll happen in the future. So the MSE tries to capture that variability. But a lot of people have been asking me, what if we're stuck in this regime that we're in right now? What if we're always stuck with small size at age and low recruitment? What would happen? And that's what the green line is trying to show. If the Pacific halibut population stayed in a low productivity regime for the next 60 to 70 years, it's quite a different picture. And so this has been helpful for people to understand that part of the reason we're here at a low spawning biomass is partly because of the productivity of the stock has been low. And what might the future look like? So there are other pictures of this at SPRs of 46, 49, and 52. And basically the purple and the green just keep shifting up as you lower fishing intensity. And then if you look at the really faint line that's behind the green band, that's the estimated spawning biomass in 2023. And so you can see there's somewhat of a high probability that we would be at a lower spawning biomass in the future if the productivity remains low. So that was something that, you know, a lot of people are trying to understand to get a better feel of where we're currently at and what could happen if we don't get a fortunate event from whatever causes productivity in Pacific halibut. The other slide is the third to last. It's probably 14 or 15, I'm guessing. I can't remember the numbers. Next and next and next. This one here. This is basically the MSE work plan for 2026. And so there's some tidying up to do of the framework and the models and the code. But basically, I think of interest to you is we'll continue the investigation of those productivity regimes. We'll evaluate how we've currently been managing the stock and just make sure that meets the objectives of the commission. And then the MSAB might provide advice on additional management procedures to evaluate different things like triennial stock assessments, different fishing intensities. And then there's some other work that will help inform reference points and sort of where we want to be. What's MSY, for example, maximum sustainable yield, what's maximum economic yield, those sorts of things. And what you might notice is not on this work plan is anything related to distribution of the TCY across the different regions or regulatory areas. So I think that's it all in a nutshell.
Thank you. Heather?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Alan, I was asking Ian questions about the depleted concept that you are going to be working on.
Mhm.
How is that work going to take place? Is there going to be like a advisory board, a scientific advisory board recommendation? How are you going to work through that?
Right, really good question. So the MSAB and the SRB will both be involved in that analysis, and that's, I think, one of the fourth line down on this work plan. So this is really almost a sequential work plan here. So I'll update the framework and the modeling to bring it up to current specifications and understanding of the Pacific halibut population. And then we'll begin to do work on depleted through simulation analysis, through a worst case scenario. You know, what if we remain in low productivity and recruitment is affected, has a relationship with spawning biomass? When would there be a low chance of recovery at what spawning biomass? So we do that through simulation and trying to get our best idea on that. That would be reviewed by the MSAB meeting in May sometime, and also by the SRB. And we'll see where we're at that point, and then we'll continue working on it over the summer, and then report back at the SRB in September, and then bring it to the annual meeting.
So you're going to make recommendations to the commission, presumably, actual recommendations.
At the AM 103 on defining what we'll call a limit spawning biomass reference point for defining depleted.
Okay.
And so that could be, you know, I don't know, the preliminary simulation showed 90 million pounds is a potential spawning biomass level that might have uncertainty in recovery. We're currently at 140 or something like that. But yeah, we'll make a recommendation to them. That recommendation is for that limit. And then what the conference board brought up is, well, then we have to determine what sort of action do we take as we approach depleted or cross depleted.
But how does that affect the harvest policy and all of that?
Yeah, so that'll be the next steps, is defining like a control rule or however, what are the actions that, and how do we update the harvest strategy policy such that it's defined what the commission does when we're approaching or crossing the depleted threshold.
Okay, and the reason I'm asking is because I want to know how long this process is going to take before we're going to have any really sort of clear scientific lines that we have to abide by, or the commission has to abide by. In my view, we've been lacking that, to be honest, for a long time. And I'm just wondering how long this process is going to take before these recommendations actually turn into harvest policy.
I think the whole concept of depleted and defining those reference points, you know, I'm hoping that does happen at the 103rd annual meeting and that the harvest strategy policy is updated for that. But that still doesn't define the action, the management action. I have a feeling that that might take a little bit longer. Hopefully, you know, within 2 years, we can define that management action. But having the limit reference point defined in there will give us, or the commission, a point to have reference to when they are making their decisions. And so it could be helpful.
Go ahead, Greg.
And this is what happens when you have one Norwegian sitting at the table. So I'm looking at slide 10 that has the purple one you were talking about. And that has it at an SPR of 43, which is much higher fishing intensity than we are at currently, because I think we're at 51.
Yes.
And then if you go down in that same presentation to the other chart you were talking about on slide 14, it shows at the status quo of SPR 51, the long-term chance of being below 30% is like non-existent. But we had a conversation earlier, Dr. Stewart, that says that we're at a 20, you know, there's approximate 20-some% chance that we're there right now. I'm trying to reconcile those numbers because you're in the chart with the purple, you're at a higher fishing intensity. And then when we go down 2 slides, where if we look at that status quo, it's saying that there's no chance of, basically no chance of being below the 30% threshold. So can you speak to that?
Oh, below the 30% threshold. Yes. Yeah.
It seems counterintuitive.
Mm-hmm. So what these results are showing are the middle portion of this table are long-term metrics. So that's looking out 60 to 70 years into the future. And this is also showing that purple is characterizing that purple plot, fishing at the status quo of 51%. So basically it's looking a long time into the future and characterizing it over there, over that range. And it is saying that if we manage consistently in this way, there's a very small chance that the spawning biomass would be less than 30%.
At an SPR of 43, not 51. So a much higher fishing intensity.
Yeah, at 43, it shows a less than 1% chance, 0.007.
Yeah.
So that, and that's the, if we go back to slide 10. Oh, yeah. So this is actual spawning biomass, and I could create these plots in relative spawning biomass. Yeah, so that is basically the results, is fishing at this consistent rate like that. It says we would have that very small probability. What the assessment is telling you is it's trying to predict what it is doing today and the uncertainty in the assessment. And so it's really a different metric that Ian is presenting. So it's hard to make that comparison.
So the decision table and this are looking at different,
very different views.
X and Y axis.
Yeah, the columns are very similar, but it is really a totally different look at it. Think of it as the long-term view. That slide 14 is really the long-term view of it.
Good.
So to follow up, we're pretty cautious right now. I mean, I think, I don't know if I'm the only one in here that feels like an SPR fish intensity rate of 51 is about as high as I can handle. And I'm glad to take a Xanax or something. But what this chart 10 is slide 10 is saying is that it long-term at a 43, that there's actually maybe more fish in there than I can get into my brain looking long-term, that the chance of the oh shit moment is not as great as I think. Was that?
And the reason that it's not as great as you think is because there's what I've heard some people characterize as hope here. I know. And that last night I was talking to people and they said, so there's some hope in this. And I go, that's part of this process. And that's something that I think we've learned over the last 10 years that I've been here, is that there are things that we can control with management. But there are a lot of things that we can't control with management. So we can sit here and hope for a good recruitment. We can sit here and hope that fish get larger for their size at age. And then we're going to see the top end of the purple there. But if we don't, we're going to see the green. And so that's how you have to weigh these risks. Sorry, I'm not much help. You want another Xanax?
No, actually, it's I have a different 4-letter word for the last 20 some years I've been doing this. And it doesn't start with an H. There's an E in there. But thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Alan, I'll just throw this out there. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. And just, I think the theme of this meeting and all the information that we've heard, well, actually for the last couple of years, is a lot of uncertainty.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the topic, right? I think from this group, we would like to, try to figure out some security for this industry in the future. And what does that look like? What level of harvest rate, SPR, what percentage is there one that we would, other than 0, that we would guarantee to start seeing a increase in the biomass?
From current conditions. There are no guarantees. Sorry. And there is a lot of uncertainty here, but I think what Dr. Stewart's shown with the decision table is that there are higher probabilities of biomass increase, and that's the risk levels, in that if we do harvest at levels less than 39 million pounds, we're likely to see increases. But how much increase? Not much. Even with no fishing, there's not going to be a lot of increase in the spawning biomass. And that's just reflective of the current conditions and the productivity of the stock. We can hope that we get another big year class, but we're not even going to see that come into the population for, another 8 years or something like that. Weighted age isn't going to change very quickly either. But, in 10, 20 years, maybe we'll be in a completely different space. I don't know. But
that maybe.
Yeah. But there is a lot of uncertainty, and that's just, a lot of that uncertainty is just inherent. It's something that we have done our best to reduce, but there's always going to be a level of uncertainty.
Well, we spent a lot of years reviewing what I want to feel like. I know that you guys put tremendous effort into it, and I want to feel like it's the best science that there is out there. But yet we find ourselves in this troublesome area. And, I've been coming to these meetings for 20 years. I've been involved in the industry for a long time. And, we're in about as tough a spot as we've been since I've been involved.
Yeah.
So it's a bit alarming. And I want to come away with a decision that's what's best for the resource at the end of this.
Mm-hmm.
For everybody. And I think even conference board, I think everybody's feeling the same way.
I would agree. And overall, I would say IPHC has done an incredible job managing this stock over time. There's been some times where it wasn't so great, and we've lived through that. But in the last, 12, 13, 15 years, it's been really good management. And as Dr. Stewart showed in those plots with unfished spawning biomass, the spawning biomass was going to decline regardless of any management action. And the management that has been done here has managed to stabilize that spawning biomass and keep it from declining even further. So you just have to remember there are forces here that we cannot control, unfortunately. But the question then, I'm not answering your question, which is what can we do? And that's where, the decision table comes in, and what sort of confidence do you want that the spawning biomass will increase?
At this meeting, I think that's true. I think there's some things on the outside of this meeting that could be done. I just can't help but keep going back to 3 billion pounds of resource being pulled out of the ocean every year, that everything, halibut, salmon, everything eats. The size, the age issues, that's a challenge for me.
Yeah.
That I have a hard time getting past. I think that setting really high limits for pollock removal. It's halibut's not the only fish in the ocean that's having size age issues. I mean, king salmon are a classic example at 50% of the size they were 2 decades ago.
Mm-hmm.
And they eat a lot of the same things the halibut do. So,
and I think where the PAB may be influential on that is identifying that as a priority research topic, identifying research on weighted age. What is affecting size at age on halibut, and make a recommendation that the commission prioritize that type of research. And that's Joseph's branch.
Great. Okay. Go ahead.
Norm,
Susan?
what I think you brought up is the other elephant, or the elephant in the room.
Yeah, the other one.
Yeah, yeah.
Didn't know
So
there were two.
Any other questions for Dr. Hicks on this?
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Webster's still at the CB.
Okay. Okay, go ahead, Kayla. Thanks.
Hi, yeah, Dr. Webster's still over at the conference board, but I can touch on your question and then he can follow back up. So the original option 2 design that we came into this meeting with put us at 502,000 as a negative revenue for the 2026 FIS. And with these modifications, we're now at a negative revenue of 773,000. So we're looking at about a 221,000 difference. I know the contribution from the U.S. was had a, I guess, stipulation that work was focused on 3B and areas 4A and 4B. The contribution from Canada, as far as my understanding is, does not have necessarily a specified stipulation that this money is for work here. But that, to my knowledge, we haven't physically received the funds yet. So maybe there's further stipulations that may come with that. But that's what I have for now. Yes. Thanks.
Greg?
I seem to remember yesterday when they were talking about that they were, when they were doing the budget, they were talking about a reduced ex vessel between 2025 and 2026 because the commission was so shocked about the increase in price between 2024 and 2025. Am I remembering correct? Do you know the percentage, what they were using for an average percentage wise?
Sorry, can you repeat your question? What were you?
So I remember them talking about the average ex vessel that they were using for their calculations on budget being less than in 2026 and 2025.
Yes.
How much?
We use a decrease in price of 10% for 2026.
And do you know roughly how many pounds they're estimating? Caught?
Yes, but not available at this moment. Just a moment. Oh, and it looks like Dr. Webster is here as well, but I can answer that question while he gets ready.
Mr. Chairman, are we
Yes, Heather.
planning to break for lunch?
Yes.
Because I've got a couple of other things.
Okay.
Not now. I mean, I have a lunch problem.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can we get through Dr. Webster's presentation and then we'll break? Is that too tight?
That's pretty tight. I mean, it'll take half an hour, I think.
Okay. So we want to break. It's pretty much 12:30. Do we want to break now?
I would put in a vote for that. Yes.
An hour? Dr. Webster, if we break for an hour and come back at 1:30, does that work for you? Okay, thank you. All right, Plan A, we'll break for lunch and be back here and reconvene at 1:30. Go ahead, Caitlin.
Sorry, just to follow up on Greg's question, the new design that we're currently looking at for 2026 has 321,000 pounds.
And you know what the 10% reduction like per pound would have been average?
I don't have that.
Okay,
available.
I can find.
Okay, thank you.
He took last year and he deducted 10% from his projection.
Yeah.
That's what he did.
Okay.
Why is there a thinking that there will be a deduction? I'm just curious on pricing. It's not, I mean, in reality, I don't think it will. I'm just curious why.
Yeah, I will certainly support Dr. Webster in answering that question
okay.
after lunch,
Absolutely.
but I don't want to answer that myself. Yes, thank you.
It's a tough one.
Yeah.